Zug, my dear friends. Today I want to present you something that I actually wanted to show off when I started to play TPC Classic last year. But as I quit on level 69 after a bit of burnout, and most likely am not returning to the official servers, I did it on the private Bottle server instead. I don't know if this is still possible on the official Classic and Retail servers because of improvements in collision detection, and also because Retail seems to have revamped the raid, making the old version inaccessible from what I've heard. If you are still able to pull it off there, I would be glad if you let me know with a comment. Anyway, for this trick you have to jump onto that specific stack of books and then try to jump onto the wall from there. Make sure you stand on the highest book and aim for the visible vertical line. Only tap the movement keys at the very start and let go of them during the jump, so you don't fall off again right away. You'll initially not land on the wall itself, but the broken collision in the air before. After that, just move forward and fall through the ground. You'll have to have some form of fall damage prevention or resurrection, otherwise you get sent to the graveyard instead and your exploration ends here already. Once you're done there, move towards the greenery. Just as a heads up, I decided to keep the original game audio and not replace it with some cancer-inducing music. It might be a bit quiet at times, because the area wasn't designed for player interaction and thus triggers for the background music are partially not present. It is still a better solution as it more closely conveys the feeling of exploring that out-of-bounds area. The blue walls you see here represent the very bounds of the map. On the official servers, they are transparent and prevent you from falling down. Here on this Azeroth core-based private server, you simply get stuck inside of them most of the time. Besides the missing textures, you might already get some strange vibes. Everything resembles Zul'Gurub, but it's still a bit off. There are probably no official statements about this instanced area, but I am pretty confident by my following explanation. Karazhan was initially planned to be released during Classic, as some of you already know, but has been postponed to TBC instead. This means when they started to build the instance during Classic development, they copied a chunk of the overworld at that point in time, and it seems it was a time when Zul'Gurub's area was very early in its development and not finished at all. I based this off of an AMA an ex-developer held. You can find the link in the video description. We are currently standing on the area where you can fight the Panda boss Bethek in the raid, but as you can see, the temple is completely missing. Just for shits and giggles, I also went into the CG instance and checked the situation there. And no, there is not another CG outside of CG. There isn't even Karazhan, and the Deadwind Pass area looks completely different. I'll most likely do another video about that in the future. Now we are entering the area of Totem Boss Jinnu the Hexer. It might look very familiar, but different still. I also check regularly if objects can be interacted with, but so far I haven't found any outside of the intended raid area. As a comparison, here is how the area looks inside Karazhan. Here how it appears in the overworld. And inside the ZG instance. Since we are already done with the very small CG area, I decided to look at the remaining out-of-bounds space. Somehow I never bothered to check them back in the day, even though most of them should be accessible even without flying. If you're asking yourself why I fly such a mental route through the area, know that there is a reason. The Karazhan castle area is mostly not inside the tower, but a little above ground before the entrance and stretches over vast areas of Deadwind Pass. It doesn't show until you enter those rooms, most likely due to loading triggers not being met. What you are seeing here is the space which will become Dreadmaul Hold later on. Any cave you can encounter, like this one here, which will become Aetherius' cave, will only consist of their entrance as a placeholder. And the middle of the Swamp of Sorrows area is the watchtower of Splinter Spear Junction. Now that we are in Duskwood, we are greeted with the ruins of Beggar's Hound and the graveyard behind. Finally, we made it to Darkshire, and as far as I can tell, there's no difference to the overworld version. Since the collision of the ground hasn't been corrected for the basement of the inn, I simply entered a command to go downstairs. In the forge you can see floating weapons, which instantly gave me PTSD from riding extremis during Classic. This mineshaft will become Roland's doom later on. Since we already concluded our trip around the outskirts, it is time to investigate the inner area directly attached to the castle. We are currently behind the tower, in an area which no longer exists in the overworld. The well-known crypts are also missing inside the instance. I certainly will do a separate video on those. At first I thought those guys only hang around inside the instance, but they're actually corpses in the overworld as well. There are two in the street in front of the instance portal, for example. I really would have liked if the game would have taken a darker path in terms of aesthetics instead of pink-haired gnome warriors and all the degenerate furry races introduced later. Left outside of the instance portal, you can see one of the skeletal griffins, and if I'm not mistaken, they can't be seen anywhere else inside. Yes, they always have been putting much love into the little details. Like I mentioned earlier, most of the castle's area is outside of the tower and simply pops into existence if you manage to stumble into it. I cut right to the spot we have been a few seconds ago, since I wanted to show you something else. Pretty much above the last ogre encampment is a giant sphere, which holds the area of the last boss. And in the center of that room is a giant spiky rock. If you have read that AMA I have linked before, it might sound a bit familiar. That stray mobs you see once in a while are probably used to trigger certain events. It's a strange way to implement game logic, but hey, what do I know? They can only be seen if GM mode is active anyway. Here is another interesting location. According to that AMA, the place you are currently in was initially considered to be the start of the instance, and what you have seen would most likely have been the instance portal. In the overworld, you can still see a remnant of that. When you fly up the tower, you see a green portal behind the gate you can only open as GM, but nothing happens when you step through it. As a little bonus, here is another way how to get out of bounds, which might be easier as long as you have a movement ability to jump longer distances. During research for this video, I found out that you can also jump up this bookshelf. Well, that's it for today. I hope you found it interesting and maybe we will see each other again in another Out of Bounds adventure. I also want to give a big thank you to the guy from Vienna who told me about it 11 years ago. I haven't forgotten you.